Oh hi. The Republic of Chad, the state in the Central Africa. According to estimated data for June 2021, the population of the country makes 17,414,108 people. The area of the country minus card came. Population density, about 13.56 people per square kilometer. The capital, the city of N'Djamena. State languages, French and Arab. The unitary state, the presidential republic under control of military junta. Presidential post and the chairman of the Transitional Council of War is occupied by Mahamat Deby. This state is located in the desert and semi-desertic area in the Central Africa. The largest state of the continent from not having an outlet to the sea. Borders in the west on Niger, Nigeria, Cameroon, in the south on the Central African Republic, in the east on Sudan and Libya in the north. Differs in a considerable ethnocultural and religious diversity. About a half of the population of the country practice Islam. Mainly Sunni sense of Malikitsky madhab. Slightly less than a half the Christianity. Generally Catholicism. In the country is also the insignificant number of non-believers and pagans. The main people, Sahara. Christian Negroids in the south of the country. And Arabs. Muslim Semites in the north. However, in total they make less than a half of the population. A prairie country with very low index of human development, one of the poorest and corrupted countries of the world. GDP volume at par, purchasing power minus 26.574 billion. $1618 per capita, the 164th place. Monetary unit, CFA franc. The toponym Chad comes from the Gidronim of the same name, the name of the Lake Chad. Gidronim is known to Arabs since the 14th century, its value, presumably in Kanura language, big space of water, lake. The territory of Chad, generally flat plain. In northern part within the Sahara Desert. In the north the Tibesti Mountains with the highest point of the country minus 3415 m. In the northeast the Erdi and Anidi Plateau. Height is up to 1450 m. In the southeast the Vadai Ray. Height is up to 1666 m. Climate of a northern part of the country, tropical desert. The southern part equatorial and monsoonal. In the north of the country there are no constant rivers. In the south the density of river network is considerable. The main Shari River flowing into the Lake Chad is navigable. The rivers widely spread during a rainy season, flooding huge spaces and turning them into continuous swamps, and during a dry season strongly shallow. Landscape of a northern, Saharan part of the country, the stony deserts which are almost deprived of vegetation alternate with the sandy deserts having poor vegetation. Undersized acacias, a camel prickle. In oases, date palm trees, grow up grapes and wheat. To the south in a zone of sail, semi-deserts and opustineni savannas with the rarefied grass cover and thickets of prickly bushes. Generally acacias. Meat palm trees of thoughts and baobabs. In the extreme south typical savannas with a high cereal cover and the woods. In floodplains of the rivers and on coast of lakes, extensive grass swamps. The fauna of deserts is poor. In savannas there are a lot of large mammals, elephants, rhinoceroses, buffaloes, giraffes, antelopes. From predatory lions, leopards, jackals, hyenas. Some animals of savannas meet on the outskirts of a desert zone. In headwaters of the Shari River, monkeys, baboons and colobuses meet. Dragons and lizards, insects are numerous. The territory of modern Chad was populated as a result of Massachusetts migration of people about the old year BC. She occurred in connection with improvement of an environment in the territory of future state. The most important archaeological sites are in Chad in the territory of the former region of Borco Nidi Tibesti. 3 different regions now. Some of these monuments are more senior 2000 BC. The Chadsky Pool is inhabited by settled people approximately from same year. The region became the intersection of civilizations and cultures. The earliest of them, Sao, is known thanks to not numerous artifacts and oral history. This civilization fell under the pressure of the Empire Khan, the first and most long empire in the territory of the Sakaliansky strip of Chad, which arose about 1000 our era. In the 16th-17th century of our era in the territory of Chad there were 2 new states, Bagirmi Sultanate and the Empire Vada. The power of these states was based on control over trans-Saharan tradeways which lay through the region. These states were Muslim. They never extended the power to the territory of the modern south of Chad where the Negroini tribes professing a cult of ancestors lived, however conducted on this territory raids for the purpose of taking of slaves. Slaves made about 1/3 of the population of these countries. The French colonial expansion led to creation in 1900 in this territory of colony which received the name Territoire Militaire de Paix et Protectorats du Chad. In 1920 the states were completely won by the French and included in structure of the French Equatorial Africa. This government was characterized by lack of policy of association of the territory and attempt of creation of national and religious unity, and also slower, in comparison with other colonies of the country, modernization. The French government first of all considered colony as a source of the insignificant, badly trained labor for development of cotton raw. France entered large-scale production of these raw materials in 1929. The colonial administration was understaffed by shots, and those that were represented, garbage, of the French state machinery which couldn't be sent more. South people which only accepted Catholicism in the south of the country coped rather effectively. Presence in the Islamic north of the country was actually nominal. After World War II, France gave to Chad the status of the overseas territory in the structure. Residents of the country were given the chance to elect own representatives in national assemblies, parliaments of France and Chad. The Progressive Party of Chad, whose headquarters was located in the southern, Christian part of colony, was the largest political force. Led by this party and its protege François Tambalbim, ethnic Sarah and the Christian unbelief Chad also gained independence on August 11, 1960. In 2 years after independence, finding the president of Chad introduced a one-party system of board, having banned opposition parties. His authoritative board, together with absolute mismanagement, aggravated interethnic and Mezreligiosny tension in the country. In 1965, in the north of the country, the Muslim Insurgent Front of National Liberation of Chad Group, Front de Libération Nationale du Tchad, Fralanat, launched civil war. In 1975, the President Toumabé was overthrown and killed as a result of a military coup. However, the revolt continued, and when in 1979 insurgents led by Hissène Habre occupied the capital, in the country there occurred collapse. In the north, a large number of groups which fought among themselves for the power was organized. The country de facto broke up. It led to crash of the French power relying on the Christian government. Vacuum tried to fill Gaddafi because of what Libya was involved in the civil war in the country. This adventure of the Libyan government ended with a real crash in 1987, when France nevertheless supported Hissène Habre, who could unite many separate groups under the control, including Christians, and forced out Libyans from the territory. Habre, his predecessor, set even more cruel and totalitarian mode then. His system of the power relied on a group of soldiers and colleagues who turned Chad into one of the most corrupted countries of the world, and also held the power by means of Massachusetts violence. By estimates, during government of junta several tens of thousands of people were killed. The president also aggravated national contradictions, giving in affairs preference to representatives of own nationality, Ethiop, and discriminating the former Muslim allies of Azagov. He was overthrown by own general, Idriss Déby, in 1990. At the same time, he tried to make Habre responsible for his actions. The former governor of Chad was imprisoned under house arrest in Senegal in 2005. In 2013, officially brought to Habre charges of the war crimes committed in days of his board. In May 2016, he was found guilty of crimes against humanity, in particular in rapes, sexual slavery, and the organization of murder of more than 40,000 people, for what it is sentenced to lifelong imprisonment. Having come to the power, Déby tried to try on among themselves and with the government insurgent groups for the sake of what the multi-party system was again introduced. On a referendum, the new constitution was approved, and in 1996 competitive elections, the first since the colonial government, on which Déby won a victory, took place. In 5 years he won the second victory, and term went to the second, according to the constitution. In 2003 in Chad, development of oil fields began. However, it didn't bring prosperity. This factor only strengthened internal political and international disagreements because of what new civil war began. Then Déby, without referendum and coordination with parliament, unilaterally changed the constitution of the country, having cancelled restriction of presidential terms. This step caused a wave of indignation both in society and among opposition. In 2006 there took place the new elections in the middle of civil war, boycotted by opposition. By the moment, the percent of the victims of ethnic violence in relation to the general death rate in the country increased. The UN High Commissioner warned that in Chad, ethnic cleansing or the genocide similar Darfur can begin. The same year, insurgents made an attempt of occupation of the capital of the country, however failed. In 2 years, the second unsuccessful attempt of seizure of power took place. I was involved in this war as well, Sudan, up to January 15, 2010, when the ceasefire agreement was signed. Thanks to it, joint forces of two countries for safety of border were developed, and a number of Chadski and Sudanese soldiers came back home. In 2013, the military coup prepared within several months against the President Deby was prevented. On April 20, 2021, the President of Chad died in collision with insurgents from the Front of Changes and Consent. His son, Mohamed Idris Deby Itno, cancelled operation of the Constitution and headed the Transitional Council of War, having undertaken at the same time execution of powers of the President and Commander-in-Chief of Army. The head of state, the President, at the same time is the Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces. According to the amendments to the Constitution adopted on a referendum on June 6, 2005, the President is elected to general straight lines and a ballot for a period of 5 years, and the unlimited number of times can be re-elected. However, this constitution was repealed after the death of the President Idris Deby by his son Mohamed, who fulfills duties of the head of the state as the leader of Military Transitional Council now. The legislature belongs to the National Assembly. Structure: -155 deputies are elected to general straight lines and a ballot for a period of 4 years. The last elections to legislature took place in April 2002. The amendments to the Constitution adopted in 2005 abolished the upper house of Parliament, the Senate. The internal political situation in Chad is characterized by armed conflicts between the African and Arab part of the population and intestine tensions in groups on social, political and economic motives. Several anti-governmental groups which are periodically concluding and breaking off peace agreements with the government work in the republic since the beginning of the 90th. Establishment of lasting peace is prevented by considerable tendency of opposition to a fractionalism. From among great opposition movements, Association of Forces for Democracy and the Development, which was considered as the largest and the strongest of those in the early 90s, represents Hobry's supporters. Armed Forces for the Federal Republic applies to protect the interests of Southerners. The Chadski Movement for Justice and Democracy expresses the intentions to achieve bigger representation in government for ethnic groups of the north of the country. In the east of Chad, the situation is destabilized by armed conflict in the western Sudanese region Darfur, as a result of which to Chad about 200,000 Darfur refugees migrated. Besides, the Darfur insurgents use the territory of Chad as the rear base. At the same time, Chadski insurgents often take refuge in Darfur. It is remarkable that Chad still up to the end didn't get rid of remnants of a colonial system, while the foreign policy of the Chadski government becomes unitarian. For the 70-80th years of the 20th century, the foreign policy of Chad was concentrated on permission of debates with neighbors that often developed into mutual support of insurgent groups. After independence, finding Chad substantially depended on the external financing which is generally provided by the Western countries, first of all, the USA and France, that to a great extent influenced his foreign policy orientation. Armed forces of Chad consist of ground forces, gendarmerie and the air force. Are intended for protection of freedom, independence and territorial integrity of the state. The country is divided into 23 regions. The administrative device changed in 2008, before there were 18 prefectures. The largest cities. Data for 2010. Gemina, 792,440 people. Nanda, 148,544 persons. Sar, 112,674 persons. Abekar, 81530 people. Population minus people. Assessment for July 2020. Annual gain minus 3.18%. Birth rate minus 41.7 for 1000. Fertility minus 5.68 births only woman. Mortality minus 10 for 1000. Infantile mortality minus 68.6 for 1000. Emigration minus 4 for 1000. Average life expectancy 53 years at men, 57 years at women. Contamination a virus of an immunodeficiency. HIV minus 1.3%. Assessment for 2018. The largest nationalities. Sarah 30.5%. And Arabs 9.7%. All lives over 200 ethnic groups. On a census of 2015. Languages. French and Arab official SARS languages, all in the south, are widespread in the country of 120 languages and dialects. Literacy minus 31.3% of men and 14% of women. Assessment of 2016. Urban population minus 23.5%. In 2020. Most of residents of Chad Muslims. 57.8%. In the country, Islam of Sunni sense of Malikitsky and Shafi'i madhab prevails. In the north of the country, influence of an Award Qadiriyya. In the south, Itidzanai is widespread. In a number of regions of the country there is Sinusitis. The largest Christian faiths are Catholics. 2.5 million. Evangelical Christians from Evangelic Church of Chad. 437,000. The Plymouth Brothers. 300,000. And Pentecostals. 187,000. The number of believers of local traditional beliefs is steadily reduced. Adherents of belief of a Bakha. 98,000. Achieved certain success in Chad. The number of agnostics and atheists in 2010 was estimated at 6.5 thousand people. Natural resources: oil fields, uranium, gold, beryl, tin, tantalum, copper, caustic soda, salt. DDD per capita in 2009, $1,600. The 196th place in the world. Below the poverty line, minus 80% of the population. Few strongly depend on the foreign help and investments. The agricultural sector. 57% of GDP. Prevails, minus 80% working or occupied with subsistence economy, generally cultivation of the cattle. Sheep, goats, camels. Also the cotton, a sorghum, a millet, peanut, rice, potatoes are cultivated. Since the end of 2003 significant oil production began. Since 2004 oil is exported. The American companies in China actively participate in development of the oil extracting industry. In 2013, oil production made 5.0 million tons, 94.0 thousand barrels a day. In 2018, Chad joined as observers OPEC. At the same time, on reserves of black gold, the country is in 41st place, and the volume of deposits is estimated at barrels. The industry: oil production, cotton processing, processing of meat, brewing, production of soap and cigarettes. By data for 2016, export $1.52 billion, import $541 million, positive balance of foreign trade, AP $0.975 billion. Main export goods: crude oil, up to 82% of the total cost, $1.25 billion. Gold, cotton, raw and other products of agriculture. The main buyers are USA, $847 million. United Arab Emirates, $168 million. India, $126 million. China, $101 million. And France, $92 million. Main import goods: products of mechanical engineering, chemicals, including drugs, textiles, footwear, food and tobacco products. The chief suppliers are France, $119 million. China, $93.2 million. United Arab Emirates, $69 million. India, $37.3 million. In Chad it is very unsuccessful. The situation with healthcare is infectious and parasitic diseases are widespread. The shortage of clean drinking water. To her, about 27% of the population have continuous access. Leads to the outbreaks of infectious diseases. Average life expectancy -55 years. In 2000, 29% of the population had access to medical care. Expenses on healthcare made 3.1% of GDP. In 2003 there were 200,000 patients with AIDS and HIV positive people, 18,000 people died. Growth rates of incidence of AIDS are 4.8% a year. 2003. Abortions are forbidden. Shots of doctors prepare abroad and at medical faculty of the University in N'Djamena. Medical institutions are only in big cities like N'Djamena and Abekir and are presented generally by institutions of the Red Cross in which French doctors work. In N'Djamena there is a private hospital of the second level. Hospital level 2 on classification of the Union. Creation of Protestant schools in the south of Chad in the 1920th years is the beginning of arrival of the Western education to the country. From the very beginning the colonial administration established requirements that all training went in French, except for religious classes. The standard curriculum was available for all comers by the state subsidies. Education in Chad was concentrated on elementary education. Till 1942 students of Chad who wished to get secondary education were forced to go to study in schools in Brazzaville, the Republic of Congo. The public high schools were open in Chad in 1942, but the school program wasn't certified to the middle of the 1950th years. After finding of independence in 1960, the government established the purpose to provide universal primary education, and attendance of school was made obligatory before achievement of 12 years. Nevertheless, development of standard training programs was complicated for a large number of schools by the fact that existed 2- and 3-year educational institutions along with standard 2-, 5-, and 7-year colleges and lyceums, preference the population of comprehensive schools Muslim. Nevertheless, to the middle of the 1960th years of 17% of pupils aged from 6 up to 8 years studied at schools. Muslim schools taught objects in Arabic. The first Muslim school in Chad, École Mohammed Ilik, was founded in 1918. Despite efforts of the government, in general the education level in the country remained low at the end of the first decade of independence. In 1971, about 88% of men and 99% of aged women or more senior than 15 years weren't able to read, write or speak French. At the time it was the only official state language. Level of knowledge of Arabic was 7.8%. In 1982 the general level of literacy was about 15%. The main problems interfering development of education in Chad after independence finding. Insufficient financing and limited number of teachers. The overpopulation is a big problem, in some classes studies up to 100 pupils. In years after independence finding many the elementary school teacher had insufficient qualification. At the level of high school situation was even worse. In 1970th and 1980th Chad achieved considerable advance in the solution of the existing problems in education. The program for training of teachers for elementary schools was developed. At the level of high school the increasing number of Chadites began to take the places in the ranks of teachers. Besides, in 1971, 72 years the university in N'Djamena was open. Other problem was that the French training programs for schools of Chad were inefficient. Teaching at elementary schools was conducted in French, though most of pupils didn't speak French when they went to school. Besides, the academic programs inherited from the French prepared students on those specialties which weren't demanded in Chad. Since the end of the 1960th years the government tried to solve these problems. The model of school on the French sample of classical education was replaced with new which taught children to live in conditions of the African state. The civil war in Chad destroyed all progress of the government in education reform. The lack of safety in extensive regions of the country caused refusal of teachers to go to work from the capital for the periphery. Besides, war caused chaos in the country and children ceased to attend regularly classes at schools. The government spent resources for a victory in war and almost stopped financing education. At last, violence in the country directly affected teachers and students. After the end of war, the government made considerable efforts for overcoming problems in education. In 1983, the Ministry of Planning and Reconstruction reported that opening of schools in 1982-83 academic year was the most successful from the moment of the beginning of war in 1979. In 1984, the University of N'Djamena earned again In 2005 in Chad civil war burst again, financing of various spheres of economy was curtailed into advantage of armed forces. The state broadcasting company on it. Office National Radio and Television Chadian, National Administration of Chadski Broadcasting and Television. Is created on August 10, 1963, includes Radio Chad radio station. Sor FM in 1956 is started. And Tele Chad TV channel. It is started in 1987. Holidays. On January 1 New Year. Noble Day Tabaski. The African name of a Muslim holiday of the Eid al-Adha, Eid al-Adha. Noble Day Clean Monday. On May 1 the Labor Day. On August 11 the Independence Day. 1960. Noble Date Ramadan. Al-Fitr Eids and Eid al-Fitr. A Muslim festival of the first meal after fast. On November 1 All Saints Day. On November 28 Day of Declaration of the Republic. On December 1 Day of Freedom and Democracy. On December 25 Christmas. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.